the last thing we want to talk about tonight is a couple of different flash techniques. All right, we've talked about a couple of these a little bit already. Let's make sure, though, that you're in your notes, and let's make sure that we understand them. Flash techniques. Fill flash. We haven't talked about that a great deal yet. We will in just a moment. We talked a lot about off-camera flash already, though. I'm not going to talk about much more about that because we've already talked about it. Again, off-camera flash is when we move the flash off of the camera in an effort to get better angles with our light, right? What sort of things can we get rid of by using off-camera flash? Red eye, hot spots. I can move shadows, or I can create shadows in places where I want them. So that's mainly why we use off-camera flash. It allows us to get rid of hot spots. It allows us to get rid of red eye. It allows us to create shadows in places where we want them, or move shadows out of places we don't want them. Fill flash. Fill flash, let's talk about that for a moment. Fill flash is a technique where we're utilizing the flash to get rid of unwanted shadows. And it's typically used in fairly bright environments. In fact, in environments where you wouldn't normally think you would need a flash. Fill flash is quite often a time where you would use a flash outside on a bright sunny day. But you're outside and it's a bright sunny day and you're using a flash. Why would you do that? Because maybe what you're taking a photo of, part of what you're taking the photo of is under the shade of a tree. And so it's a little darker. And so it's being underexposed. So you might need to take a photo where you use the light from the flash to eliminate a portion of that shadow. So fill flash, please write that in your notes. Fill flash is a technique used to get rid of shadows. Off-camera flash is sometimes used to create shadows, especially when it comes to photographing footwear impressions. But fill flash is a technique used to get rid of shadows. Let me show you an example, a very simple one of fill flash. Before we get to that, a couple of little points. Typically, fill flash is used during the daytime. It can, though, be used, for example, in a home, in a crime scene situation. Maybe you're in a living room, and you've got the lights turned on, so maybe the living room is nice and bright, but maybe there's an area that's kind of obscured in shadows. So even though the room might be bright, if we have an area that's obscured in shadows, we still might need to use the flash to get rid of that shadow. So again, it's used to fill in shadows. So here's a good example. Ron, would you grab the two lights for me real quick? Thank you so much. I appreciate getting up and down. So here's a very basic example. So here we have, here's a photograph of a van in a parking lot. And this is taken, at noon, right? Lots of light outside. And actually, the photograph of the van itself is properly exposed. But what you can't tell, though, is underneath this rear tire, there's an object there. And it's hard to see it because it's in the shadows.
What is it?
Well, if we took another photo, this time we held the flash down low. Notice when we take another photo with the light coming in below, now we haven't completely gotten rid of the shadow, have we? But we've put enough light there that you can see that that object's just a brick, right? So an example could be if you had someone that shot somebody, right? And then they're fleeing from the police, and then they try to ditch the gun. So they're running, they throw the gun bounces underneath the car. Well, guess what? Believe it or not, it can be hard to take a picture of that gun under a car at noon because it's really bright outside, but underneath the car, it's in the shadows. So this is an example where you would need to use a flash to get rid of that shadow, even if it's bright and sunny outside. Could you grab the lights for me again, Mom? Fill flash, again, used to get rid of unwanted shadows. Make sense? Another example of fill flash is just, if you're taking a picture, this happens, taking pictures at a family function, especially in like June. You ever go to a family reunion in June? Right? It's a big family function, everybody's having fun. But then we're like, hey, let's take a big group photo. And so you go to take a photo and like half the people in the family are like under the shade of a tree because they hate the sun. And then the other half are in the sun. And you go to take a photo and the people that are in the sun are properly exposed, but all the people in the shade of the tree are underexposed, a little too dark. If you simply took that photo with the flash, everybody in the photo would be properly exposed. Again, that's an example of fill flash. So even if it's bright and sunny outside, we still sometimes use the flash. Let me show you another example of when it would have been useful to do this. I think I showed you guys this photograph last week, but I'll pull it up again. No, it's okay. You can leave the lights off, Ron. Thank you, though. I appreciate it. Oops, that is not the right presentation. Sorry, pulled the wrong one up. It's opening up now. Remember the gentleman I showed you the photo of the guy that went underneath the car, that was hit by the car, dragged underneath the car? You guys remember that photo I showed you last week? If not, I'll show it to you again real quick. Anna just really wants to see pictures of dead bodies.
I love it.
All right, so remember the photo of this gentleman here, right? The guy that got hit by the car, got dragged underneath the car. Remember, unfortunately, trying to identify the face is very difficult because it got so chewed up. But again, what would be a good way to identify the person? Remember this photo? That's that tattoo that's on his arm.
Yeah, the one that's...
The problem, though, is you can't see it because it's what? It's in the shade, right? This photo was taken at noon, bright sunlight outside. But because the photographer was not quite paying attention to the shadow, part of that tattoo is is not properly exposed. It's in the shade. It's in that little shadow caused by his shirt. And so it's hard to read, right? So again, if we want to get rid of a flash, use fill flash. Sorry, we want to get rid of a shadow, use fill flash. All right, last thing I want to talk about is a technique called painting with light, and then we're done. All right, painting with light. So you guys give me 10 more good minutes and we're done. Painting with light. Let's talk about that technique. Painting with light is a specialized photo technique that's used to photograph very large areas when you have little to no light at all. So an example of a situation where you'd have to use painting with light. Let's imagine you've responded to an auto accident on Interstate 10, way west, going out towards Los Angeles. So we're out in the middle of the open desert. There are no street lamps, right? So literally, we have a rollover accident. There are no street lamps, no moonlight. It is just dark, right? We have this rollover accident. We had 2 cars involved. So we have one car that's rolled over and is way over here, 50 or 60 yards. We have 2 or 3 bodies that have been flung out onto the freeway. We've got another car that's way over there, 30 or 40 yards. We need to photo document this whole scene, and it's pitch black. And unfortunately, this might be a situation where we do not have any floodlights. All you have is your camera, a flashlight to help focus, and your flash. This flash right here. And you need to take a few photos that are overview photos, at least showing where the 2 cars are relative to each other. Or at least a photo of the skid mark that's 100 feet long. Remember, what is the maximum range of this flash? Is it 100 feet? No, it's under 40 feet. So if you need to take, let's just talk about the skid mark on the road. Let's not even talk about the other cars. Let's say you need to take a photo of that skid mark on the ground that's 100 feet long. Can you take a photo of that skid mark with just this flash? The answer is yes. And the way we're going to do it is we're going to use a technique called painting with light. So let me explain how we would do it. What we do is we would use our camera. Now this is a situation where we're not going to use the sync speed, even though we're using flash. What shutter speed do you think I'm going to use? Bulb, exactly right. So I'm going to put my camera in manual mode, and I'm going to adjust my shutter speed to bulb. Remember, bulb is a shutter speed where if I push the shutter down, the shutter opens, and it remains open until I release the shutter. So how long could I leave the shutter open? As long as I wanted. An hour, 2 hours, 3 hours. So because I'm going to leave the shutter open for a very long time, maybe as long as an hour, I can't hold perfectly still for an hour, can I? So I'm going to have to put my camera on a tripod. So exactly, I'm going to mount my camera on a tripod. I'm going to put my shutter on bulb. And then I'm going to push my shutter release button. Now there's a setting on here, by the way, where when it's in bulb, once I push the shutter release button once, it opens the shutter, and it'll stay open until I push it again. So when I'm doing this, I don't have to sit there and hold it down the whole time, all right, just so you know that. I'm going to push it, I'm going to open it up. So now, the camera is on the tripod. I'm taking a photo down the road because I want to get those skid marks right. Camera's on a tripod in the middle of the road. It's on bulb. I push the button. The shutter is now open. I'm not going to stand here, right? The camera's going to stay right there. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to take my flash, and I'm going to paint the area with light, which means I'm going to turn my flash on. I'm going to put my flash in auto mode because I want the flash to control its output. And then what I'm going to do is think about this flash like a spray paint can. But instead of spraying paint, it's spraying light. So what I can do is I can walk around. I can do this in the same room. In fact, Ron, would you turn the lights off for me? Let's say I wanted to take a picture of this room. Imagine that this was a football stadium or a basketball stadium instead of a room that's 30 by 30. Could I take one photo of that basketball stadium using just this one flash? No. Yes. I could set it up. All I would need to do then, it would take me forever. But I would take this flash and I would point it up at the wall and I would set it off. And then what it would do is that would fill that whole area with light. Think about setting off a paint bomb in that corner. It wouldn't fill the entire room, but it would cover that whole area, right? And then if I pointed the flash over at this area and set it off, I would cover this area. And then I would need to set it over here, and I'd point it at the wall, and I'd hit that area. And then I would point it over here at this wall. Can't forget the ceiling. Just like when you're painting, right? You got to get everything. Get the ceiling. What else have I forgotten? I got to get the floor. By the way, notice in no time do I ever point the flash at the camera. The flash should always be pointed away from the camera. You also have to be careful. You don't want to point the flash at yourself. Now, keep in mind, I'm walking around, right? Remember, my camera is set up right here. And I'm walking around. Am I going to show up in the photo? Nope. As long as I'm careful, as long as I don't hit myself with light, I will not show up in the photo. The only thing that will show up in the photo is the areas that I have hit with light. Just like when you're painting with a paintbrush. As long as I don't paint myself, right, I'm not going to get paint on me. As long as I don't hit myself with light, I'm not going to show up in the photo. I could. Ron, can you turn the lights back on for me? If I wanted to, I could, though. If you want it, artistically speaking, let's say you want to take a photo and you want to show up in the photo several times. If I had my camera set up on a tripod here, and then if I stood like right here, so I'm in the frame, and then I pointed the flash at myself and I set it off, there's going to be an image of me right here. And then if I moved over here, remember this is all one photo. And if I set the flash off again, now there's going to be a ghost image of me here. And then if I walked over here and I did it again, I could actually take one photo and I could make myself show up in the photo 20 times if I wanted to.
That's so cool.
Right? So painting with light's a great technique for taking crime scene photos of large areas. But it's also a great technique just to take really neat and interesting photos.